This is quite amazing.
Okay, we're about to start. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for our sixth Jai Jagat talk on nonviolence and peace. My name is Arsen Kharatyan. I'm here with you from Armenia, and with me today is my dear friend, a great peace builder, a specialist in conflict resolution, a writer, and a philosopher, Irakli Kakabadze from Georgia, Tbilisi. Tonight's talk is going to be, as announced before, is going to be about the Georgian National Liberation Movement and independence of 1988, 1989, in particular the events of April, where the nonviolent movement for freedom in Georgia basically turned quite problematic and bloody, and to be the first probably one in the former Soviet space. So Irakli, who has also been part of the movement back in the day as one of the organizers and leaders of the student and the youth movement within that revolution, will share with us a little bit his own experience, but also that particular period of Georgia's history. And we will continue discussing between us what impact it had in general to the overall developments that followed after the 1989 events, as well as some of the initiatives on larger peace building in South Caucasus, but not only that, the two of us together with some other friends involved in peace building have been doing, and of course touch upon the influence of Mahatma Gandhi and the nonviolence as a tool, as part of the movements here in our region, including those of the nonviolent revolutions, the change of power, the positive transformations, and of course some of the other aspects and episodes of our history. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for finding time this evening and to supporting our webinars. And without further ado, I will ask my great colleague Irakli to give an opening statement.
Thank you, Arsen, and I'm always delighted to speak and participate in the events together with you and my friends, and especially when we are both involved in Jai Jagat. And it's incredible. It's really incredible to be here and right now we are kind of in some ways forced to have a different format of the conferences. We usually attend the live conferences together, and we've been to many of those together, including last 5 years. We've been doing, since 2014, we've been doing a number of Jai Jagat events together with Rajagopal and Jill and Ambassador Sajankar and Joe Samuel, and lots of our friends from Jai Jagat movement around the world. This time we wanted to talk about how Mahatma Gandhi has influenced the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And one of my main topics, and one of our main topics, has been that the dissolution of Soviet Union was influenced first of all, and number one, by Mahatma Gandhi, and not so much by other points. And I would like to point out that two leaders of the Georgian National Liberation Movement, who were there at the time when the Georgian National Liberation Movement was going on, from 1987, 88, 89, and 1990, Merab Kostava and Zviad Gansakhurdia, both of them were great admirers of Mahatma Gandhi. And actually, both of them knew very well the work of Gandhiji. They studied it very, very thoroughly. Unfortunately, contemporary historians are hiding this fact. And in fact, this is known to his actually Ziad Gamsakhurdi's son, Constantine, who is a very knowledgeable person, very intelligent person. That's the best source on getting the information, the historical information about Ziad Gamsakhurdi and Merab Kostava both, since they were very, very close friends. And Arsen, you know him as well as I do. Last year we brought him to Armenia, and it was a very interesting visit. And Konstantin Gamsakhurdi is one of the best historians right now in Georgia. And he talks about the influence of Gandhiji on Ziad and Merab, which is very big. Both Gamsakhurdi and Kostava have written poems and works for Mahatma Gandhi. And they have deliberately set up the liberation movement as a nonviolent movement, as the road of Gandhiji. And they were saying that there is a road of Gandhiji, and there is also a road of the armed revolution, which was the alternative to it. And both of them have rejected the armed revolution as the road to liberation. And this was the beginning of the roots of the National Liberation Movement. And actually, from 1988 up until the beginning of 1990, it was proceeding this way. And that's when Soviet Union started to crumble. And it started to crumble, I would say, and I would argue, and I would say the historical evidence will show us decisively under the influence of Mahatma Gandhi, not under the influence of Ronald Reagan and George Bush and others. I don't want to right now bring down anyone, and this is not a negative talk. This is a positive talk, and we want to encourage people to do the transformations and change, and in a way, in a Thomas Kuhnian way, the social revolutions and the conscientious revolutions. But the way out of the different totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, and certainly the Soviet Union was an authoritarian regime against which we have fought a lot. And I was lucky enough to be on anti-Soviet committee since May of 1988. And we were participating in that struggle all up until the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The greatest influence on the national liberation movement was Mahatma Gandhi, as well as on the nonviolent revolution in Georgia in 2003, and then, of course, the great Armenian experience that happened 2 years ago. But in 1988, this was very, very unusual. At that time, we have to remember the film of Richard Attenborough came out in 1980s. I think it was 1983, 84 when it reached the Soviet Union. Film about Mahatma Gandhi came out there, and a lot of people watched it on, it was a Russian translation that time, around the Soviet Union. It came in Georgia, Armenia, and other places too. And I remember that time people were really, really in awe watching this film about this guy who, without one arm, one single gun, has destroyed the biggest and most powerful empire in the world, and about whom the Winston Churchill was saying that you cannot believe that this one naked man has destroyed the biggest empire in the history of the world. Now, of course, now we, after 30 years, we can reminisce about this and say that this road proved to be the most effective road, the Gandhiji's road, the road of Ahimsa, Sarvodaya, Swadeshi, Swaraj, proved to be the real way to struggle, real way to win the struggle, and real way to change and transform contemporary world. And this is the best way, not the military struggle, but the non-violent way of structural change. And this is the only way to proceed forward. Today, we see the challenge of our consciousness, to switch from the bourgeois consciousness to the consciousness of the conscientious human beings. And around the world, the whole world is suffering from the closed-mindedness and narrow-mindedness of the bourgeois consciousness, how to challenge that. And the best way to challenge and transform the bourgeois consciousness around the world and to become the conscientious humans of the 21st century and to save life of humanity in times of pandemics and biological and climate change, all of those great dangers that are facing humanity right now is the road that Mahatma Gandhi set up. And if we follow it and go through it, and if we follow that route, I think that will be the road towards the liberation of humanity from the narrow-mindedness of the bourgeois consciousness.
Thank you, Irakli. Thank you for your inspiring opening remark. I want to, because we have a very specific topic, but of course we can go more broadly. But I would like to maybe suggest a couple of questions, which I think, or I assume our viewers and colleagues might be interested. So getting back to 1989, Irakli, something that you have witnessed. You've witnessed many revolutions, including the one in Georgia, the one in Armenia, of course, and I mean the ones in the 2000s already. But going back to 1989, kind of revaluing or revisiting the whole idea of this liberation or independence movement, where Georgia kind of became the pioneer on using the word independence and or discussing it, and was punished. So the nonviolent movement in Georgia grew to the point where the coming political leadership would formulate the idea of independence, and basically starting together with Armenia, of course, in this region and other countries in the former Soviet space, but beginning the disengagement with the Soviets. What were the main challenges of the time? We are, of course, here with a lot of people who know the context, but we also have some young people who may not remember it at all, or not have any memory of what the Soviet Union was. And what were the mistakes, would you say, that were kind of made during this dissolution and during this independence movement? Somebody who has been inside, what's your view from within?
Yes, this is a great question. I think that what you have emphasized very rightfully so is the situation in 1987, 88 when it started actually, and of course it started in Armenia and Georgia and all the other places around the Soviet Union at the same time when Gorbachev perestroika went into that second phase of the liberation movement. One great thing was that when the people started the non-violent movement, and I would again re-emphasize, it was the movement of ahimsa, non-violent, Mahatma Gandhian movement, and Gandhiji's road to Swaraj. That was going very well in all of the countries. In Georgia's example, until it was led by Merab Kostava and Zia Gamsafulia and their friends, who were, most of them were convinced Gandhians and who were not the bourgeois nationalists, but who were actually internationalists and who were thinking in a Gandhian roads and ways that we need to liberate the whole humanity from narrow-mindedness of nationalism and ethnocentrism. It was winning. And what happened in 1989, you mentioned it very rightfully so. The leaders of national liberation movement, in 88 and 89 decided to distance themselves from ethnocentric and nationalistic, the bourgeois nationalist slogans of ethnic origins of totalitarianism, yes, as Hannah Arendt would put it, ethnocentrism. That was a big problem that originated after 1989. But before April 9th of 1989, when the Soviets had to crack down on liberation movement in Georgia, the only demand the Georgian national liberation movement has placed was independence, independence and liberation. And there was a solidarity coming from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, from all the Baltic countries, from Ukraine, from other countries. We were joined, and I remember our Armenian colleagues coming from Yerevan, and people were together. And we were not divided by ethnicity. And the problem originated after we have won the first struggle. First struggle was won after April 9th because the Russian army, the Soviet army, has cracked down on us, on the non-violent protesters on the night of April 9th. Right now, 31 years have passed since then. And the Gorbachev had the first defeat that time because the whole world saw the violent nature of the Soviet regime, of the Bolshevik regime. And it proved to be really showed its evil side, and it proved to be really a violent regime. And so that was the start of dissolution of the Soviet Union. That's why I emphasize one more time that the non-violent ahimsa struggle that in Georgia had two stages. First one was in November of 1988, and then the second one was in April, beginning of April of 1989. And both of those stages have won the struggle with a great advantage. And then, of course, the pace has accelerated. And what happened was that throughout the Soviet Union, it proved to be contagious, and Baltic states adopted strong tactics after that, and Ukraine joined in. Of course, Armenia voted for independence after a while, but all the countries went through the same, basically, road of independence. But at the same time, what was the main problem that originated basically starting from 1990 and going on forward after that was that the bourgeois ethnocentrism came into the conscientious thought of some of the leaders of the national liberation movement, and they started to articulate ethnocentric demands. And that's what played a totally violent role in dividing the liberation movement of different countries and actually pitting them against each other. And within the bourgeois consciousness and within the nationalism and within the ethnocentrism, we find only divisions. And what we found after 1990, that the profit-oriented bourgeois elites, in order to maximize their profits, they tried to push the nationalist card, that we are, like Johann Galtung formulated very well, they were pushing the narrative of being a chosen nation and that we are traumatized by experiences that were oppressing just us, but not them. Just us, but not them. Just us. And that became a big problem. That became a huge problem, and that started to cause violent clashes. In Georgia, it started in 1989 already, the first clashes, but then, of course, really what triggered it was 1990, 91, and 92, start of the war in Abkhazia. And all of that was the influence, and we have discussed this on many roundtables together with you, Arsen. In 92, basically the bourgeois nationalistic and ethnocentric brand became the leading brand. That narrative continues to be there for 30 years, and it caused only misery and devastation of all the nations in the Soviet Union and around the world. And what we have seen is that thousands of people have perished, and right now we start to realize, and those of us who have not supported it, and I need to say I have never supported the bourgeois nationalism in Georgia, and we have always been consistent in saying that Gandhian, non-nationalistic and non-bourgeois way, which is oriented on a farmers' economy, a Swadeshi economy of sharing. And sharing and caring is the best alternative to the Soviet authoritarian regime. And right now, uh, I think this imperative comes back again during the pandemic time and during the time of the big economic troubles that we are expecting in the world, that sharing and caring becomes the only imperative of the world right now. And bourgeois nationalism is not going to lead us towards any prosperity. It's going to lead us to the war and destruction. And we already see the biological weapons and all kinds of things used, and this is horrible. We need to become more positive, and the way Gandhiji was, uh, basically adopt the road of ahimsa, non-violent transformation and of our consciousness, of our community, and going back to the earth and saving our earth from ecologic catastrophes and from climate change induced problems, and then, of course, from the lack of resources that is totally artificial, and the scarcity that is basically given to us totally artificially by the nationalistic bourgeois elite. So that's the basic problem. Georgia still has the problem of the bourgeois elite, and it still suffers from it.
Thank you, Irakli. Thank you. I think I've counted bourgeois nationalism and ethnocentrism about 17 times in the last 5 minutes from you. But I hear you and I understand. I actually from what I can gather from your response is that basically what we have lost is maybe this sense of internationalism or larger human unity that to a certain degree maybe existed more before than what we had after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I mean, on the one hand, I fully agree with you that the Soviet state was an authoritarian regime where we obviously had limited rights on many levels, but at the same time, it seems like it was able to sustain somewhat a different system, and that's a whole different story and discussion on how this was possible to, or was it even needed to continue. Here is Jill joining us and leaving, I guess. But moving forward, I want to maybe touch upon. You spoke about the conflicts that sparked in the region also right after this liberation movement. What is it that we haven't gotten yet? I mean, we do have, in many ways, very different conflicts, but similar and with similar origins in our region. We have Abkhazia, Ossetia, we have the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we just had elections there yesterday, in fact, and we just had elections in Abkhazia about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. We are seeing, of course, the issues with the general virus spreading around, but at the same time, from the one hand, one would expect that the virus would become a uniting, would play a uniting role for people, and kind of would be this full stop for a second, and rethinking of how we are moving forward, where we're going, what is it that we're not doing right, where is it that we should definitely have more cooperation, and I don't see much of that talk happening yet, at least within our own society. Now, you're in Georgia, you have you do have a similar situation like ourselves. There's a state of emergency in our countries. The movement is limited, and so not that the movement was much more active before, but what's going on at this time of crisis between Abkhazia and Georgia?
Well, actually, right now in Abkhazia, as you have said, there were elections, and it was very successful. Actually, it was very interesting that Abkhaz elections proceeded in a very civilized way. amazing how the candidates were dealing with each other. And Mr. Aslan Jania has won the election, and it was really, really very nice to watch the Abkhaz elections. We were following it, and the new Abkhaz leader looks to be a very smart guy who knows what he's doing. And right now, of course, we are in this trouble all together. All of us are trying to face the pandemics. We need to help each other out. Everyone needs to help each other out. So we are there to help, to be of assistance to anyone, and we also hope that others will assist us, because this invisible enemy doesn't know the nationality, and doesn't know the ethnicity, and doesn't know the religion, and doesn't know any kind of identity that is sparing of death. So we are right now preparing to fight the pandemics together, and help each other out. And of course, there are some problems. For instance, we are very concerned about the lack of ventilators around the world. Somehow it looks like the ventilators were not produced, and we need to find some creative ways to overcome this lack and the scarcity of ventilators and other medical equipment, including the protective masks and the tests and etc. Around the world, we are facing the scarcity, and it looks to me it is an artificial scarcity of tests, an artificial scarcity of masks, an artificial scarcity of the ventilators. And we need to find a creative way, entrepreneurial way in some ways, and entrepreneurial in a good sense, ways to for the governments and some private entities to create a lot more of those protective materials throughout next 2 years, especially because it looks like we're going to be dealing with the pandemic for next 2 years around the world. It's a big challenge. And one of the factories came up with the idea of producing the small ventilators in Georgia. And I definitely think Georgians and Armenians have been known as very creative people with inventing new things in arts and sciences. And we need to join our forces right now to battle the virus together with our international friends, with our Indian friends and Canadian friends and everyone, because it looks like we definitely would need to bring more and more of our human resources together. It looks like the financial resources are very limited at that time. And um, for instance, one of the issues right now is the availability of the ventilators. Abkhazia, of course, has a small population of people, but at the same time, the infrastructure, of course, I mean, all of the infrastructures around the region, um, in all regions of Georgia, or I'm sure in many other places, that we don't have enough of the supplies. And we are getting ready for the number of the people who are sick to increase, of course. And we need to have more ventilators. We need to have more medical equipment. We need to have more doctors. And it's really amazing that Cuba is right now helping lots of other countries with the doctors. They have more people educated in medicine than lots of other countries. And the existing neoliberal structure is not working with that. The number of doctors, the number of health workers and public health workers was sufficiently lower than it's needed to overcome the one of the main threats of our century, which is pandemic. And this is not the first one, but also not the last one. And even if we overcome this virus, which is right now spreading with the whole big force, even if we overcome this, we're going to have new ones coming up in the nearest years. So that means that we need to have more public health workers. We need to have more equipment. We need to have more prepared society for all kinds of biological threats that are coming Sometimes they're coming from nature. Sometimes they might be the leaks from the irregular research or whatever is the reason. We don't know. It might be just natural reasons, but we are facing this because of climate change, because we have not listened to the scientists, we have not listened to our internal voices, and we have, as a humanity, stepped out uh, of the of the ethical kind of boundaries that were leading us towards the normal life. So in this case, with what I should say, returning to the question of our relationship with Afghanistan, of course, right now the, there are a number of hospitals in Western Georgia that are ready to receive patients from there, and we hope it would not be needed. We hope so, because of course you always hope that the hospitals would not be needed. And Georgian Prime Minister has expressed readiness to help Afghans and Ossetians and everyone basically who is uh, around to help, and we need to be only in that spirit. But the problem is, of course, the deficit and inefficiency of existing resources and scarcity, artificial scarcity, which is also, I won't repeat that expression since I already said it 17 times. Okay, we're going to say neoliberal policy of the artificially induced scarcity, and adopting the policies of non-violent economics. Private Powell loves to paint it, and it's the only way to proceed with world economics. Economics based on scarcity is not working, and right now we see it during the pandemic. We need to have an abundance of ventilators, abundance of the equipment, and we need to create that and put all our economic resources, all of us, to create more and more resources to help each other out to overcome this disease.
So, as we're hearing from many thinkers, economists, activists, and scholars, obviously there might be, not might, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that this pandemic is going to result in a recession. It's not. It might be some headlines are also saying that this will be the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression. And as you were mentioning, food scarcity, other issues that are there in the world already are definitely going to become harder. Now, on our end, as by size smaller countries here in the region, where do you see a possibility or an option maybe to unite forces, to join forces in confronting these challenges, rather than having the problems of the conflicts and the continuous nationalism and ethnocentrism, as you were mentioning earlier on. Now, where do you see some pragmatic moves, and maybe a chance for opening a dialogue from now on future collaboration and cooperation in order to confront the further risks that are going to be around? As for now, I mean, coronavirus has shown already that it doesn't know borders. The artificial borders that we humans have put it on the political map of the world are there, obviously, which have come to this point throughout years and decades and thousands of years of history of wars, and I don't have to talk about that. I don't want to go too generally discussing this, but do you see a kind of an opportunity in this at this time of the crisis to kind of be able, or to where, in what specific areas would you say do we nations here in the Caucasus have areas for cooperation? is there an opening? Let's say we know the Russia-Georgia relations are problematic. We know Armenia-Azerbaijan, Armenia-Turkey relations are problematic. In the first and foremost, maybe in the South Caucasus, within our own territory, but also further, do you see anything positive that can come out of this?
Well, I think there are lots of avenues of collaboration. And you and I have started this Giorgio Armani kind of a dialogue around overcoming of different scarcities that existed before the pandemic came out. But right now, with the new situation in the world, we see the the danger that is immediate right now. And of course, we need to collaborate in creating the new resources for each other. And the Southern Caucasus is a small region. And we need to overcome these really small, narrow-minded divisions and really, really try to collaborate on creating more. And this is going to be an impetus for economy also. We start to put together, and we need to imagine that we are engaged in a war with this pandemic. Of course, this is the enemy of humanity, unseen enemy, which we don't know where it came from. And we don't know. There are lots of theories about that, but that really doesn't matter. We need to unite our forces against the scarcity of the medical equipment, against the scarcity of medical supplies, against the scarcity of medical workers, which means the government together need to elaborate the program to train more people in helping now thousands of people who are going to be flooding the hospitals and creating new ventilators and creating new face masks, creating new medical equipment, and creating many more natural medicines for this, and treating the earth better and having more sustainable development. All of that becomes a challenge that we have to face together at the same time. This is a non-violent economy. We need to have an economy that creates a wealth for maintaining and helping the life instead of eliminating the life. We were based on an economy that was creating arms, and we were investing trillions of dollars in arms producing that were produced to kill human beings. Right now, we see that we miss those trillions to save the life. And we need to organize ourselves as a humanity in general. And that's where Jai Jagat comes in very, very handy. Because the philosophy of the Gandhiji and philosophy of Sri Rajagopal and our friends from around the world, and we do follow the line. We need to create more and more, work very hard more and more, regardless of our identity, that we need to overcome the scarcity of right now the medical equipment and food and the jobs, because there will be lots of jobs needed to overcome the pandemic. This is not going to last 1 or 2 months. Everyone today predicts we need at least 2 years to overcome just this one particular pandemic. But then after that, we will have others. So we need to mobilize our societies. We need to mobilize our communities together and start working very hard. And governments need to put together new jobs to save human lives, because existing medical workers are not enough. They're not nearly enough. Existing social workers are not enough, not nearly enough. Existing farmers, local producers, local farmers in Georgia, Armenia, and South Caucasus in general are not enough. So we need to mobilize our forces to intellectually and also economically help each other out and overcome the scarcity which we are facing right now. Because if, and we are really close to that moment, if we do not mobilize our societies to collaborate and cooperate on all these levels, then we will face a big catastrophes and tragedies. So we do have a positive road towards unification, human race unification. And that we need to follow.
Thank you, Irakli. Thank you for these great calls for the unification and unity. We together have been trying to do this on various fronts, including that of the Georgia-Armani or the Georgian-Armenian collaboration, and then bringing, concentrating on a lot of the similarities and commonalities rather than divide. And this has been one of the largest issues that we've had throughout. I mean, I don't want to sound too trivial, but divide and rule has been the name of the game in many ways here, especially with smaller ethnic groups here in this part of the world. But I think we are into something with this virus as bad as devastating as it is for the humanity, for the economy, world economy. It is also a huge time for rethinking a lot of the ways we have been operating and trying to understand where is it that we actually need to find ways where we can actually do stuff jointly. So I think I don't want to bore our listeners too long, but if you have some maybe closing remarks or maybe some points that you would like to make, you want to do it now. Other than that, we will be continuing our webinars on Jai Jagat, whatever it is that you want to say.
Yes, I think we need to think about creating a peace zone in South Caucasus, and we have been working on that also for a long time. And I think we need to put a lot of work in that, how to create a nonviolent and peace zone, a zone of ahimsa, and the zone of a liberation from violence, and including the structural and cultural violence. We need to liberate the peace zone from structural and cultural violence, and create this kind of peace zone. And we had a proposal in 2009, which we have written together with Susan Allen and with our friends from Azerbaijan, Russia, the United States, and the European Union, and others. And we pursued that at the conference in Arezzo, Italy, in 2009. Those were the good times. And I think we need to bring it back. And we need to start working on that with our colleagues around the world, because the peace zone becomes a very relevant concept right now. Moving from violent economics to non-violent economics. Moving from scarcity-based economics to non-scarcity-based economics. This is the road. This is the only road of survival for humanity, for the whole humanity. And yes, the politicians yesterday, Mr. Trump talked about reopening the economies and opening up. We cannot reopen the economy of scarcity. You cannot reopen it because it's a closed economy for lots of people. We can reopen only when we save all these lives, and we can reopen the economy for everyone, where everyone can join in and participate. And that is a very big challenge. It's not easy, but at the same time, there are the roads for that. And creating a peace zone, and we need to start small in Georgians and Armenians. We are small countries, but we have a long history. We have survived for a long time, thousands of years. Right now, Georgians and Armenians, we can start creating a peace zone, and creating a peace zone that will be a zone free of scarcity of economic resources, free of scarcity of food and agricultural produce, which we know we have a long tradition of doing the agricultural produce, and medicine. Yes, that some Georgians even suggested medicine. The word medicine comes from the Medea, the old Colchian queen. Yes, I mean, we Georgians and Armenians like those historical things, where we always compete who has older what and everything. That's on the humoristic side. But on the other hand, we both have created lots of things that we need to operate the creative genius of both our nations and all the nations around us, around overcoming this artificial scarcities that are created right now by the system. So we need to create an alternative system that will be much more humanistic and much more oriented towards the welfare of the communities and humanity around us. So proceeding towards the peace zone and including in that dialogue the grassroots, the multi-track dialogue, as our friend John McDonald used to put it, multi-track dialogue. All tracks will be involved and reaching out to the government of Georgia, Armenia, and others, and bringing the vision of Jai Jagat in and saying that nonviolent economic ways and nonviolent collaborative ways of action, uniting around the ideas of Gandhiji, but bringing the new dimension, the 21st century dimensions that look into the future, bringing all those new ways to collaborate and create a scarcity-free world and scarcity-free pockets of the world will be the road to sustainable development, will be the road to our future, building the future of the peace and not war, and of the prosperity and not suffering.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Irakli. Thank you for these great calls and reminding our viewers the idea of peace zone that we indeed together have been discussing and trying to kind of implement and trying to bring into the attention of colleagues here an area where you would have both free economic interaction, but also a somewhat of a small oases of these peace zones. Our great colleague and professor Chris Mitchell has been talking and discussing this for a number of years, including those of the names that you have called, our friends Susan Allen Nan, and again getting of course to the great John McDonald. The idea of creating such a zone and maybe starting from small projects might be of interest. Unfortunately, from what I feel, the calls for peace are not very popular, even at this time of pandemics. Sometimes we're seeing escalation on the line of contact and or the border here between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and this doesn't actually look like people are realizing the entirety and the problem, the scale of the problems that we're facing. Just about 2 weeks ago, when the elections were happening in Karabakh, there was an attack from the Azerbaijani side on a village from the Tavush near the Georgian, Azerbaijani, and Armenian border, in fact. And this shows that the full realization of how we should unite is not there yet. So I think there is a need for greater calls from different capitals, from different groups, from names and the people who have the authority, who have the courage to stand up at times and talk about non-popular stuff, and know that first in the early stage they might not be very well received or heard, but to continue and to kind of carry on the great work of Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, our great leaders of peaceful transformation and revolution all over the world. So I think this is a time for maybe new leaders to raise up, to get up there and talk about uniting. I was remembering years of Hollywood films talking about alien attacks, and I maybe am shifting to a different, but I think it's the same discussion on how humanity have to cooperate when there is all of this sci-fi film that started coming out starting from the 70s and the 80s, when they were basically calls for unifying around the environment, around the world that is ours, and then stop the pollution and then stop the environmental degradation and take the climate change as seriously as it is. So I think our webinars will continue. Our next speakers will be great colleagues from the US and from Armenia. They will be talking about religion and the role of religion. Our great friend Rich Rubinstein will be joining from the US, and a good colleague, great friend, Hovanes Ovanesyan from Armenia, a member of parliament and a scholar also, and of course Rich, who has been in conflict resolution and conflict and religion for a number of years, and that will be happening in 2 days on April 17th. And on this note, I want to suggest maybe wrapping up with today's webinar, and thank again, and hope to see you soon. Although, as you know, Georgian-Armenian border is closed, and it hasn't been this long for a long time, as you were mentioning before the talk began, that we haven't traveled to each other. And so I hope really that this travel ban and or the limitation on the border passing will be withdrawn sooner than later. However, both in Armenia and in Georgia, the state of emergency has been prolonged. In Georgia, it will be until May 10th. In Armenia, it will be until May 14th. Some of the economic activities and some of the spring movement is coming up today in the streets of Yerevan. I really do hope that this time of crisis will be nearing its end sooner than later, and I hope that our listeners and participants here on Zoom will be interested and excited with the continuation of our Jai Jagat talks that have been going on already for a while, and the walk that unfortunately has been terminated while the coronavirus pandemic started to appear in our region. And so on this, I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I want to thank you, Iraklijan, for being with us, and stay home and stay healthy, as they say.
Thank you.
Jai Jagat and good luck.
Jai Jagat.